very good evening and greetings of the day to all the members who are there in the other parts of the world. It's raining cats and dogs on my end, and in a very untimely manner where rains cannot be expected. So, typically, an imbalance in the existing climate. And today we are going to talk about net zero, which basically refers to the concept of achieving a balance between the amount of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere and the amount or offset resulting into net increase in the Earth's overall greenhouse gas concentrations. So net zero goals involve reducing emissions through various means such as transitioning into renewable energy sources, improving energy efficiency, and implementing carbon capture and storage, while it also offsets the remaining emissions through practices like reforestation or carbon credits. So the key part of this global efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change through achieving net zero. So it's also crucial for addressing climate change, protecting the environment, improving public health, and fostering economic growth while aiming to create a more sustainable and secure future for our world. So in doing so, in today's discussion, we have our two community partners. First one being GSFN, which is also abbreviated as Global Sustainable Futures Network, UK. And they have a collaborative initiative dedicated to advancing sustainability and tackling global challenges within the United Kingdom and across the world. So GSFN UK unites a diverse range of stakeholders, including business, governmental agencies, and non-profit organizations, also individuals, to collaborate on sustainable solutions. So the primary goals of this organization is to involve championing environmental preservation, advocating for social equity, and fostering eco-friendly economic development that is also socially inclusive. So the network frequently hosts events. One such is also this event that we're doing today. And they also have projects that design to promote innovation, share knowledge, and encourage sustainable practices in different sectors, including renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and green technology. So through facilitating cooperation and exchange of knowledge, GSFN contributes to the promotion of sustainable practices, the attainment of environmental objectives, and establishment of a more equitable and environmentally conscious society across the world. We have another community partner, which is named as IGEN. When we hear the word IGEN, it also means, or we all sync with this idea as Generation Z, which also is also referred as millennials. So this generation, as we know, comprises of individuals born approximately from the mid-90s to early 2010. So IGEN, or the generation from this people, are notable for their tech-savvy upbringing, and they are in sync with the digital era, and they're always marked by ready access to smartphones, social media, and the internet. So just like these characteristics, which along with this generation can also be recognized as individualistic, pragmatic, socially aware, and entrepreneurial. So as much as we mentioned these features, our community partner, the Institute of Green Engineers Network, commonly also abbreviated as IGEN, they have all these key features included as part of their organization. So with a primary focus on promoting sustainability and environmentally responsible practices, particularly in the realm of engineering. So IGEN's objective is also to unite professionals, academicians, and enthusiasts who share a deep commitment to green engineering and sustainable technology. They facilitate the exchange of knowledge, and they also foster networking and collaboration, and actively engaged in research and development. So IGEN frequently initiates educational efforts which are aimed at raising awareness about sustainability and advocates for policies and practices that advance eco-conscious engineering. So basically, this network serves as a central hub for individuals and collectives dedicated to infusing sustainability into engineering practices with the aim of contributing to a more sustainable and environmentally conscious future. So it is now time to invite Dr. Srividhya Sukumar, who is our program head, and I'm honored to introduce her. So she's an educationist, consultant, governance advisor, QA expert for compliance and audit, and strategic transformational coach for life and business, and mentor for professional development. She's a R&D training specialist, author, columnist. She's a volunteer at many organizations. Some of them include UNESCO, UNICEF, Emirates, Red Crescent, Al Maktoum Foundation, and Sharjah Social Welfare. She's also a certified life member of World Human Rights Protection Commission. Dr. Vidya, I take my pleasure to welcome you, and I hand over to Spearhead to speak further about COPs.
Very good afternoon and warm welcome to one and all. So, it's like every Sunday we are talking about this COP. It is Conference of Parties. In other words, it's called as. And with the most committed team of GSFN, which is headed by the program partner, Dr. Renuka Thakur, representing herself amidst us every week. A warm welcome to you, ma'am, and your team. The program director and coordinator of Ranjana Halka and program coordinator of Nadeem Shaheen and Mohammed Hassan Paramba, the youth ambassador. Along with us, as Madam Sandhya Balaji was mentioning, we have other team who is partnered with us, that is IGEN, with the program, with the spearheading of program partner, Dr. L. Ramesh, the president of IGEN, who will be joining us very soon, we hope. And program director, Dr. Sindhil Kumar, hope he is here around. Welcome to you, sir. Program coordinator, Dr. Kavita, who does the coordinating for the speakers outside IGEN and also internally. We have our program coordinator, Dr. Ishrat Meera Mizana, who is a program coordinator internally within IGEN. A warm welcome to you, ma'am, and the youth ambassador, Mr. Pius Niranjan. So every week we meet here on this platform amidst eminent speakers to speak about COP. That's Conference of Parties. As we all know, that the series of the meetings organized by the United Nations Framework Convention of Climatic Change, that is UNFCCC. The countries that are the parties to the convention come together to discuss and negotiate on the international climate policies and agreements. So the COP meetings are crucial in addressing the global climatic change issues and setting international climatic policy goals. They provide a platform for countries to review progress, negotiate agreements, make decisions, set targets. COP meetings occur annually and are numbered sequentially, with each conference being referred to. And the highlight of it is the one which is going to happen in the month of November with COP28. So that's where we are, and that's why Dubai has taken the center for conducting these online virtual COP meetings to refresh ourselves and recoup with all the recommendations from eminent speakers, such that we would like to make your voices being heard at the places where it has to be. So these COP meetings are essential moments in the global effort to address climatic change, as they provide the forum for countries to come together, share information, negotiate agreements, and make commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming. So what are things that we address? We address on climatic finance initiatives. Can anyone please let Mr. Mohammed Arif Raza to enter? Thank you. Climate finance initiatives, technology transfer and capacity building, carbon offset projects, climatic education awareness, climatic research and data collection, policy and advocacy reforms. So all these reforms and efforts. So these projects can be funded and implemented by the governments, international organizations, non-governmental organizations such as NGOs, private companies, and even other stakeholders. They play a crucial role, a vital role rather, in advancing the goals of UNFCCC, addressing the challenges posed by the climatic change on a global scale. So, what happens during our COP meetings? We feature discussions, try to pass on agreements which are related to the funding and support of such projects and other in different countries that they are representing from. So these COP projects typically refer to the projects and initiatives that are related to the goals and objectives of the United Nations Frame's Convention on Climatic Change. Moving ahead, we have structured our vision and mission such that we talk about enhanced national climatic action plans, facet of core, where we try to engage youth into it, such that we call it as the feature as youth engagement, which is on global solidarity to limit global warming and so giving nature-based solutions. Moving ahead, there we are with today's topic on the road to net zero. So when it comes to net zero, what is that? The main thing it hits about. It calls for governments and companies and other organizations to bolster commitments to reach net zero emissions become increasingly widespread as the effects of failing to limit climate change becoming more apparent. So despite of the growth of the sustainable technologies in the recent years, carbon emissions continue to increase. So reaching net zero emissions means removing an equal amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, from the atmosphere as we release into it, such that it will help us to effect on the current climatic change commitments on not enough to keep the planet within 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial times. So the urgent and coordinated global action is needed within the decade to combat the growing climatic change threat. So what does this net zero actually mean? And importantly, what can be done to put our planet's emission on a safer course? So that's what the whole talk is all about. So what is net zero applies to is a situation where the global greenhouse gas emissions from human activity are in balance with the emission reductions. So at net zero, the carbon dioxide emissions are still generated, but an equal amount of carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere as it is released into it, resulting in zero increase in net emissions. So while sustainability efforts are increasing around the world, some sectors are harder to decarbonize than others. Heavy industries like iron and steel making, for example, transport like aviation, shipping and road hauling are particularly hard to electrify. So abating emissions in these sectors requires the new climatic tech solutions, such as carbon capture, utilization and storage, that is CCUS technologies, that prevent carbon emissions from heavy industries reaching the atmosphere. So for this, efforts are much, and also we need more ideas, and also funds are requested or required. So the synthetic fuels can provide cleaner drop-in alternatives to fossil fuel, like petrol and diesel for aeroplanes, ships, and trucks. So many new emissions busting technologies are still at the early stage of development. So we need to contribute on developing these kind of developments with the business case yet to be proven. So reaching net zero will require huge investment to scale up these solutions and bring costs down. So on this note, we have collected with speakers from every part of the globe who are going to contribute on the first pointer, that resilience to disruption caused by the climatic change, by Mr. Bennett George, standards of net zero emission pledges by Professor Dr. Wolfgang George, and nationally determined contribution, NDC, a climatic action plan, will be addressed by Dr. Halimat Top Akaje, hope I've got the name right, right? Decarbonization targets with Mr. Ernest Kanaka, and invest in carbon markets will be addressed by Dr. Moises. If he is not going to turn up, it will be taken up by one of the members from the board. Greenwashing to net zero by Dr. Isa Albert, and the global effort to reach the net zero will be addressed by Dr. Gokul. On that note, we extend a warm welcome to all our speakers who have joined us on this platform today. Hope you have a good day with us, and we expect points of deliberation where the action speaks more than words. Thank you so much. Over to Madam Sandhya Balaji.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. So let us go ahead and begin with our first point of deliberation, which is resilience to disruption caused by climate change, which is actually vital to safeguard communities and ecosystems, as already suggested by Dr. Srividhya when she spoke about this topic. So by implementing adaptive strategies, such as fortifying infrastructure, diversifying agricultural practices, and conserving natural resources, we can mitigate the impacts of extreme weather events or conditions, which are like rising sea levels and shifting climate patterns. So building this resilience ensures our ability to protect lives, livelihoods, and the environment in an ever-changing climate landscape. So to speak more about this, we have with us Mr. Benitez George, who is an advocate for environmental science, sustainability, and collaboration. So he had always had a strong commitment to addressing this most pressing challenge, which is sustainability. And he excels in finding the critical intersections between research, business, and policy. His expertise lies in environmental conservation and management, and he possesses a deep understanding of these fields. So in addition to his technical acumen, Mr. George is well versed with other skill sets, such as including capacity building, content creation, and advisory services. He has worked with clients in both public and private sectors, and he has offered unique technical and environmental solutions that are tailored to specific needs. So his core objective is to improve the quality of the environment and ensure the well-being of current and future generations through sustainable resource utilization. So we welcome you, sir, and we look forward to your point on resilience. Mr. George, are you there? Mr. Benitez George, are you
I
there?
don't think we have him, so you can continue with the second speaker. If they appear, we can bring them on board.
Okay, we'll do that. So our next pointer of deliberation is standard for net zero emissions pledges. So this actually means it is very crucial to ensure transparency, accountability, and effectiveness when we are addressing climate change. So these standards define clear and measurable targets and timelines and methodologies for achieving the net zero emissions. So, and it includes regular reporting, independent verification, and alignment with scientific assessments, which are all essential to hold all the bodies such as government, organization, and individuals accountable in their efforts to reduce emissions and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So to speak on this, we have Professor Dr. Wolfgang Georg Alt. I hope I got your name right, sir. and he has been involved in the tourism and international relations, and his career time spans to 4 decades. So he has a remarkable 45 years of experience, and he has dedicated his time to understanding. In working with China, he brings profound knowledge of country's tourism dynamics. So he's been an educator over 2 decades in the international tourism management. So Professor Alt has influenced and guided future leaders in the world. So he also serves as the CEO of COTRI, which is China Outbound Tourism Research Institute. And he regularly contributes to research and insight into China's booming outbound tourism market. Apart from his role as a CEO, he also believes in bringing about meaningful tourism, and he is also committed to bringing about sustainable and meaningful travel experiences. So his area of expertise is to bring about meaningful tourism and emphasize on travel experiences that bring a positive impact on individuals and destinations. So he propagates a concept called as hedonic sustainability, which promotes enjoyable and sustainable travel practices. So apart from this, Professor Alt is an author, event organizer, researcher, keynote speaker, trainer, and consultant, with his scope being at the global level. So his influence extends across many countries, and definitely he is one of the valuable resource in the tourism domain. We welcome you, sir, and we look forward to your inputs.
Okay, thank you very much for your very kind and extensive introduction. You make me blushing, and thank you also for Renuka to bring me into this group of experts and important people in the indeed most important topic we have, which is sustainable development. So can I share my screen?
Yes, sir. And before you begin, may I also request you to keep your presentation up to 10 minutes, at
Yes.
best, not more than 15 minutes.
I see. You have been working with professors before. I recognize that. Okay, so then let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oops. Sorry. Yes. I hope you can see the presentation. And
Yes, it is visible.
okay. So yes, so I named this Facing Reality and the Need for New Standards for Adaptation and Mitigation with regard to climate change, of course. And as you have mentioned, so my special expertise is in tourism, but during the pandemic, we also started something called the Meaningful Tourism Center, based on this concept of meaningful tourism. I will speak shortly a little bit later. But first, I'm afraid I'm the harbinger of bad news, and so therefore, I mean, you know all this data, but I think we have to, in 2023, we have to face reality, and so looking at what is the situation now, and so you see that when we talk about the greenhouse gas emissions, we would need a reduction by almost half. But actually, if all the pledged action plans for the nations are going ahead, we will have still 10% increase. And if you look at the CO2 emissions, you have seen this graphs before, it goes up unabated, and especially if we look at this one, we can see that all the events and all the accords and agreements we had have not done a iota in changing the way the CO2 emissions are increasing, and also the temperature levels rising, getting darker red and darker red, so that there is no any impact to be seen from until now what has been done. And also, I think the famous 1.5 degrees Celsius limit, we have to be aware that we are living in the year when this has been broken. And you can see that since half a year, we are above the line, which would make on average for the whole year then a 1.5 degree level. So this is the dotted line you can see. So therefore, I think this is something we have to stop talking about. We want to achieve the 1.5 degree. It's over. We lost this battle, and there's no point in keeping the public in the cozy idea that there might be a way that we keep below 1.5. This is over. And so this is what Mr. Guterres called the price of humanity's fossil fuel addiction, and that is probably a good way to describe it. More importantly, I think, is what already last year the head of the World Meteorological Organization, Professor Talas, said something which I think has not been widely reported, which is even if we stop polluting completely, so we are net zero tomorrow morning, the situation will get worse every year for more than. Sorry, somebody, can you please mute yourself? Can you? Yes, okay. So the situation will get worse every year for 4 more decades. The Earth is not reacting very fast to changes. So that is an important point to see. Whatever we do, so not in 2050, but now, if we somehow a miracle would happen and there would be no more pollution, it would be 4 decades before it stops getting worse. And on the bottom you can see this is just in a few days ago that in West Antarctica the scientists say now that the battle against the rapid melting has been lost, and that we are facing the leader of the study said people who are alive today, so that's us, are going to see a significant increase in the rate of sea level rise in all the coastal cities around the world. So this is a fact which is whatever we do from tomorrow cannot be stopped anymore. And I'm sure you have been seeing the studies that if bigger parts of the West Antarctica shelf are melting, we are facing an increase of 6 meters of sea level. And the last point to see is that, of course, you're all aware, I'm sure, of the concept of tipping points, so that there are a number of tipping points we are already close to reaching from law of studies, including the Atlantic circulation, and including obviously Amazon rainforest, the loss of the permafrost in Siberia, and so on. And so from all the studies I've seen, it looks very much like most of these tipping points we will reach before 2050. So that is something we have to look at. Even more importantly, I think, than these bad news, don't shoot the messenger, please, is of course also that it's not only pollution we have to look at. It is, as has been said in the introduction, of course, it's about the life of not only flora and fauna, but also the human beings. So to prevent people being hungry and being in bad social situations. And unfortunately, the latest reports, which were published a few months ago about the SDGs are showing that not a single one is on course to achieve by 2030. And again, quoting Mr. Guterres, he said, until we act now, the 23 again will be an epitaph for a world that might have been. And so I'm very happy to see in the group of speakers and participants, there's a lot of ladies involved, which is very good. But if you look at the goal of gender equality, if it increases by the current level, it will take another 300 years before gender equality is reached. And a lot of this is based on the simple fact that we have now 26 people who have the same wealth as half of the world's population. That used to be 80 people, now it's down to 24 of people who are basically are not only having a lot of wealth, but also owning things like Twitter/X or Facebook. And so most of the global communication is also controlled by a few of these men normally. So therefore, what I think what we have to see is that, first of all, well, there is realistically, we have to see that until now, there are no signs that we are in a positive development in terms of pollution, temperature rise, loss of biodiversity, concentration of wealth, and the de-democratization in many countries. So if we are reaching net zero by 2050, even so it doesn't look like, but maybe, yeah, with our shared work and commitment, maybe we can manage it in the end. It will be too late to avoid reaching the tipping points within the next 3 decades. And so once the Western Arctic ice shelf is melted, this is the second law of thermodynamics and entropy. It will not become ice again. And if the Atlantic circulation stops, the UK and Northern Europe will be covered by glaciers and nobody can live here anymore. So, and the third point is that concentrating on emissions alone and ignoring the other SDG aspects will not work. And of course, this has also been said already in the introduction. We have to look at the distribution of wealth and the support of democratic structures if there's any hope for action. So what does it all mean? That there's a need to develop holistic standards to measure the efforts and results of all the work which is done, so including social, economic, institutional, and ecological aspects, so the 4 parts of sustainability, as a way to slow down the progress. So climate catastrophe will happen. The question is how fast it will happen and how severe it will be in the coming 50, 60 years. So the change which we need to measure needs to be systemic. And I think just using quickly 2 examples. So flying is not a problem. Allowing the aircraft producers for many years to burn fossil fuel to propel the aircraft, this is a problem. So the point is to put pressure to speed up the development of SAFs and others. And we have seen with electric cars, if there's enough pressure from the politicians, from the public, from the market, from the consumers, then things can move much faster than had been said before. So there's no point to blame the passengers for this problem. And by the way, as you know, Netflix, YouTube, and online porn together create as much pollution for the electricity units than flying. And also electric vehicles, you can clearly see are reducing pollution, which is a very good thing, but they do not solve the key problem of cities around the world, that still the cities are built around cars, which are actually only moving 5% of the day. Otherwise, they're parked somewhere. And so there's the technology is there that you have autonomous pods which are moving around all the time and can be used by everybody. So that would be a place to gain city space and have green cities. So there's no point in keeping the car industry alive by moving from fossil fuel powered cars to electrical vehicles. Better than nothing, but it is simply not enough. So as has been said, so my main expertise is in tourism. So we developed something called meaningful tourism as a concept, where we are saying that all stakeholders of tourism, the travelers, the host communities, the staff working in companies, the companies themselves, the government, and of course the environment, need to have an increase in quality and satisfaction. And we have developed a set of indicators which are not only concentrating on pollution. Of course, this is a major part, but it can only be worked out if it is also including all the other aspects. And so you see the link at the bottom. So the major results have been published from us by us free of charge. You can download. This is 72 pages and see the results, and therefore also have a detailed discussion of the criteria we have been using. So coming to the end, time is limited. The need is there for new standards for, and this clearly saying what we are doing is to adapt and mitigate, so not stopping. So wishful thinking and blaming each other will not help to slow down the climate catastrophe. There's a lot in tourism. There's a lot of debates. Oh, we are the travelers. We are behaving well, but oh, look over there, this bloody tourist. If only they would behave better. That is not helping us. And also, and this is something I've been discussing with many people, but I think clearly telling people if only everybody does a little bit in their private life, then it will change for the better. This is counterproductive, but because it will produce frustration. Because as the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization has been saying, we know that for the next 4 decades, in the next 40 years, things will get worse, whatever we do from tomorrow morning. So instead of telling people, if you don't use plastic straws, everything will be fine, telling people what is the real situation and hoping that this helps people to focus on fighting for systemic measures to have adaptation and mitigation. So this is something which I think is clear. It is wonderful. We have so many initiatives doing things, and of course, they have to be supported, they have to be done, but it has to be done with the clear understanding that as long as the basic systemic approach is not changed, these will be drops in the ocean. If you are in tourism, then we have a Meaningful Tourism Award coming up, so you can still apply until the 10th of November for that. And otherwise, if you're interested, you see my contact dates down there. Please contact us on the Meaningful Tourism Center. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm afraid that these are not very uplifting thoughts on a Sunday, but I think we have to face reality and react to this in a realistic and systemic way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Wolfgang. And that was bang 15 minutes. Yeah, and thank you so much for throwing light on reality. And may I now call upon Ms. Jessica to summarize Professor Wolfgang's inputs.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Dr. Wolfgang. Your presentation was quite insightful and really let us know about the urgency of climate change. And this urgency of climate change is truly a crisis that affects every corner of the globe and is pushing humanity to reevaluate how we address the escalating challenges it presents. So from your wonderful presentation, I was able to get some few pointers. And the first one was that we need to accelerate climate impact. And climate change is not just a distant threat, it's here now. So we witness more frequent and severe wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, and flooding. And our current standards for adaptation and mitigation falls short in the face of this accelerating impact. You also talked on tipping points and feedback loops. So the potential for tipping points in the climate system, such as the collapse of major ice sheets, underscores the urgency of stronger mitigation standards. New targets must prevent us from crossing these dangerous thresholds. And we also have the points of global cooperation. The climate crisis is a global challenge that requires international cooperation. And so by setting new universally accepted standards, we promote collaboration as every nation. Sorry, who's? We promote collaboration.
Mr. Lukman, may I request you to kindly mute yourself?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So through global cooperation, we are able to set new universally accepted standards, and this can promote collaboration as every nation and stakeholder follows a common path towards sustainability. And the final point is innovations in energy and transportation. So there needs to be the rapid evolution of renewable energy and sustainable transportation that demands new standards that can harness these innovations to achieve emissions reductions faster and more efficiently. So thank you so much for your insightful presentation. It was a pleasure, Professor Dr. Wolfgang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And as we move on, since we are unable to get our chosen speakers for our first pointer due to some unavoidable reason, so may I request our program lead, Dr. Srividhya, to throw light upon resilience to disruption caused by climate change.
Thank you, Madam Sandhya Balaji. So, kindly bear with me for coming back again. So, how are it is? Well, talking about resilience, what is meant by resilience? Yes, it's the act to withstand, recover quickly from our difficulties, from our toughness, from any kind of a situation which we are not able to handle. So it's more kind of an elasticity, like a rubber band, how it just bounced back exactly from what it has been thrown to us. So that's how this resilience comes, basically. Well, going ahead, sharing my screen, I hope I will be able to do it. Maybe I will take Madam Sandhya Balaji's help.
Yes, I'm here.
Is my screen visible?
It's still loading. It's visible now.
It's visible, okay. So, right, I need to clear off my, yeah, hope it's fine. Thank you for a livable climate over here on this evening as such, and across the group when we talk about COP2030. For net zero commitments must be backed up by credible action. That's what my good friend of mine, Ms. Jessica, was stressing. So let's put forth everything into action as such, taking it forward. And the commitments must be backed up by bold, credible actions. So there we are. So hopefully I'll go to my, yes. So resilience to disruption caused by climatic change. So the three main factors that we need to take into account, the adaptation principles that we are going to put forth in action. The second one is the people who are going to do it, and exactly the help the people and the firms to be better prepared. And the third is the outcome. I request somebody who is just not muted, can you mute yourself, sir? May I request the other speakers to kindly mute yourself so that we can go ahead with the session? Mr. Lukman, I think you need to mute yourself. Okay, moving ahead. So, what are the story highlights? Climatic risk cannot be reduced to zero, which means governments must take decisive action to help households and the businesses manage them. So, this is what has been the report of World Bank report on the adaptation principles, a guide to designing strategies for climatic change, adaptation, and resilience. And it lays out 6 universal principles to help policymakers plan for the adaptation, along with the 26 actions, 12 toolboxes, and 101 indicators. So over the past decades, Uganda made a remarkable progress in reducing poverty and boosting socioeconomic development. In 1992, some 56% of the population was living in poverty. By 2016, the figure had fallen to 21%, yet the global economic ramifications of COVID-19 pandemic and the effects of the climatic change are forcing the country to confront new challenges. Shocks not only threaten further progress, but can reverse hard-won successes of the past. Around 72% of the Uganda's labor force works in agriculture, in a sector that is highly climate sensitive. Take coffee. Uganda is Africa's second largest exporter of coffee. Over 17% of Uganda's exports are coming just hide this value crop. Recent droughts, however, are estimated to have destroyed half of the coffee yields. In the coming decades, the changing climatic conditions are expected to pose profound challenges to Uganda's coffee sector. Without adaptive measures, only 1% of Uganda's current coffee producing land is expected to be able to continue production. And coffee is just one sector that we're talking today that could face the mounting impacts from the climatic change, with the 2.3 million poor people in Uganda facing high level risks. So this is a storyboard that I'm trying to project, taking Uganda as one example. So in countries around the world, the climatic change poses a significant risk of threatening lives and livelihoods of people. These risks cannot be reduced to zero, which means the government must take decisive action to firms and people to manage them. Doing so requires planning ahead, putting in place a proactive measures that not only reduce the climatic risk, but also accelerate development and cut poverty, according to the new report. So adaptation cannot be an afterthought of development. Instead of integrating it into policy thinking upfront, governments can catalyze robust economic development while reducing vulnerability to climatic change. So moving ahead, I'm just cutting down because Sandhya will say, ma'am, we need to stop. I don't want that. So point number 1, build resilient foundations with rapid and inclusive development. Poverty and lack of access to basic services, including infrastructure, financial services, healthcare, and social protection, are strong predictors of vulnerability to climatic change. To put it another way, the poor communities are the more climatic change will affect them. No adaptation strategy can be successful without ensuring high vulnerability populations having the financial, technical, and institutional resources they need to adapt. Number 2, help people and firms do their part. It's crucial to boost the adaptive capacity of households and firms. Many already have incentives to adapt, but they need to help overcoming obstacles ranging from the lack of information and financing to behavioral biases and imperfect markets. Governments can make information on climatic risk available, clarify responsibilities and liabilities, support innovation and access to best technologies, and ensuring that financing is available to all, especially for solutions that come with a high upfront cost. And they will also need to provide direct support to the poorest people who cannot afford to invest in adaptation, but are the most vulnerable to experiencing devastating effects of the climate change. Revise the land use and plans and protect critical infrastructure. This is the third point which I need to highlight. In addition to the direct support to the households, business, governments must also play a role in protecting the public investments, assets, and services. Power and water outages and transport disruptions are estimated to cost more than $390 million per year, according to already in developing countries. But if the countries have the right data, risk models, and decision-making methods are available, the incremental cost of the building, the resilience of the new infrastructure assets is going to be small, only around 3% of the total investments that is being projected. Urban and land use plans are almost important responsibilities of the public sector, and they will influence massive private investments in housing and productive assets. So it is vital to these adapt to evolve long-term climatic risk to avoid locking people into high-risk areas. Number 4, help people and firms recover faster and better. Risk and impacts cannot be reduced to zero. Government must develop strategies to ensure when the disasters do occur, people and firms can cope without devastating long-term consequences and can recover quickly. Preparations such as better hydromet data, early warning, and emergency management system reduces physical damage and economic losses. For example, shuttering windows ahead of the hurricane can reduce damage by up to 50%. The benefits of providing universal access to early warning systems globally have been repeatedly found to a larger exceed cost by factors of at least 4 to 10. And then financial inclusion such as access to emergency borrowing and social protection are the essential words to help people get back to the You know who's that? Adaptive social protection systems, which can be rapidly scaled up to cover more people and provide support after disaster, are particularly efficient, but they rely on the delivery and the finance mechanism that they have created before a crisis occurs. Manage impacts at the macro level. Coping up with the climatic change impacts in one economic sector is already complicated. Coping up with climatic change impacts in all sectors at once requires strategic planning at high levels. So through many impacts in many sectors, from floods affecting houses, prices, to changes to ecosystems affecting agriculture productivity, climatic change will affect the macroeconomic situations and tax revenues. Some impacts on major sectors, especially exporting ones, can affect the country's trade balance and capital flows also. And spending needs for adaptation and resilience need to be added on for the top of the existing contingent liabilities and current debt levels to create further pressure on public finances. So the combination of these factors may result in new risk for macroeconomic stability, public finances, and debt sustainability, and a broader financial sector. So governments will need to manage these risks because of the massive uncertainty that surrounds macroeconomic estimates of the future climatic change impacts. Strategies to build the resilience of the economy, especially through appropriate diversification of the economic structure, export proposition, and the tax base, are particularly attractive over the short term. So the last point, prioritize according to the needs, implement across the sectors, and monitor progress. So governments must not only prioritize actions to make them compatible with available resources and capacity, they also must establish a robust institutional and legal framework and a consistent system for monitoring progress. So the main objective of this adaptation and resilience strategy is not to implement standalone projects. It is to ensure that all government departments and public agencies adopt a mainstream strategy in all decisions, and the governments continuously monitor and evaluate the impact of the decisions and actions so that they can address any challenges and adjust their actions accordingly. To conclude, so a range of practical tools that can help the governments implement adaptation strategies, for example, economic analysis methodologies can help to select the most important interventions, and the budget tagging methods can ensure spending inconsistent with expectations. A set of 101 indicators is also provided to enable governments to track the progress towards the greater resilience, to identify the areas that are lagging behind, and to prioritize the effective measures. It also sheds light on how COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic crisis can affect the design of the adaptation resilience strategy, recognizing how it has changed the development of the landscape in other countries. So the impact of the climatic change are already here and the fast increasing, and there is no silver bullet to prevent them. Proactive and robust actions ahead of time, however, can go a long way to help people and communities. So what natural disaster strikes, not only that they are better prepared to respond, but hard to one, the developmental gains are not lost. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Over to Madam Sandhya Balaji.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya, and thank you for keeping up with the time as well, much lesser than 15 minutes. May I now request Ms. Jessica Anabor to moderate Dr. Srividhya's inputs.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Srividhya. Very insightful, very interesting. I was quite immersed in it, didn't want it to end. And through your presentation, we can see that resilience to disruptions caused by climate change is a critical and multifaceted challenge that individuals, communities, governments, and businesses must address. Your presentation indicates the need for the climate resilient infrastructure. And this is through developing and retrofitting infrastructure to withstand extreme weather events. And this can be in the case such as fortified buildings, flood defenses, and resilient transportation systems. There is also the need for ecosystem protection. Healthy ecosystems that will act as natural buffers against climate change impacts, resilient strategies that will involve the preservation and restoration of these ecosystems, such as wetlands and forests. We also notice the disaster preparedness and response. There is a need to develop and implement emergency preparedness plans to respond to extreme weather events, and including events that were not even planned, such as the pandemic. There needs to be relief efforts. There needs to be evacuation procedures. We're also noticing the need for community engagement. Resilience efforts should include community participation, ensuring that those affected by climate change have a say in decisions and strategies. We're noticing the need for sustainable business practices, for supply chain diversification, for resilient businesses adopting sustainable practices, and disaster recovery plans to maintain operations in a changing climate. And finally, there is also the need for government policies. Governments play a central role in resilience through policies that encourage these climate adaptive measures. And this can include various things such as emissions reduction targets and disaster responsive plans and building codes. Now, that's just to keep it short for the very immersive lesson. I thank you so much again, Dr. Srividhya, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jessica. That was beautifully summarized. We now move on to talk about NDC, which is the Nationally Determined Contribution. And it's a climate action plan submitted by individual countries to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, also known as the UNFCCC. So each of this NDC outlines a country's specific commitments and strategies to reduce greenhouse emissions and adapt to limit global warming. So these contributions serve as a key country's commitment to address climate change while considering its unique circumstances and capabilities. So NDCs play a critical role in shaping the global climate policy and action. And to speak more about it, we have amongst us Dr. Halimat Akaje, and she's a part of Zero Carbon Africa Impact Fellowship. She's a master's in law from the University of Ilorin, and she serves as a lecturer in Kwara University at Nigeria. We welcome you, Dr. Halimat Akaje, and request you to keep up the time between 10 and 15 minutes.
Good day to you all. I'm happy to be part of the presenters for today's program. On my topic, nationally determined contribution, a climate action plan. When we look at the NDCs,
Professor, can I request you to be a little more louder?
I hope I'm heard.
You are audible, but it will be better if you're a little louder.
NDCs.
Yes.
All right, thank you, ma'am. NDCs are at the core of the Paris agreements. Yes, they are the core of Paris agreements. They are voluntary, self-defined, politically backed pledges of individual countries under the Paris Agreement, and majorly, the NDCs contains plans, or let me say terms, both short terms and medium terms plans that countries have or are put in place for the purpose of reducing global temperature. We are all aware of the impact of climate change. We are all facing the challenges of climate change impacts, such as destruction of livelihood, wildfires, food shortage, scarcity of water, and so on and so forth. So there is definitely need to put in place measures for the purpose of mitigating the impact of climate change. And while the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, the NDCs were developed as a means of achieving the aim and objective of the Paris Agreement. Naturally, governments are expected to go back to their countries, come up with pledges or commitments or ways by which they can achieve their pledges while considering their capabilities and capacities. So there are no pressures on countries. Countries are expected to pledge to the extent of what they can achieve. So NDC is just a way of achieving the goals of Paris Agreement. However, when countries submit their NDCs, they're expected to adhere to it. They're expected to put in place measures that will facilitate the achievement of those NDCs. Let me come back to Nigeria, for example. Nigeria submitted its NDCs in 2021. And as a follow-up to that, Nigeria has also put in place different measures, such as the passage of the Climate Change Act into law, the formation of the National Council on Climate Change. These are to ensure, and even the passage or the development of the energy transition plan to enable the transition of people from relying on fossil fuel to renewable energy. So basically, NDCs are just put in place to ensure that countries follow up whatever targets or whatever agreements they've made under the Paris Agreement. By virtue of its nature, the NDCs have both binding and non-binding elements. Yes, the binding elements are that countries are expected to update and their NDCs every 5 years, and they're expected to submit that and communicate that to the UNFCCC. Apart from that, countries are also expected to provide information as to correct and clear information as to the tracking of the implementation of their NDCs. So for the non-binding agreements, countries are expected to put in place measures based on their capacity and capability. Apart from that, most of those NDCs make provision for conditional goals and non-conditional goals. Conditional goals are those goals that countries will only achieve based on being able to access funding from outside, while non-conditional goals are those goals that they can be achieved. Basically, for me, I think the NDC is a very good way to go. At least countries are put on their toes. Many countries have robust NDCs like Somalia, Egypt, Nigeria, and so other countries. It's a very way to go. However, there are other things that countries need to put in place. The NDC is just an action plan, or let me say kind of a commitment of what countries intend to do. But there are so other many things that countries must put in place for them to be able to achieve their NDCs. When we look at the issue of climate, let's talk about the issue of climate. The major cause of climate issues and global warming is GHG emissions. So countries need to go back and tackle those issues from the bottom up. Yes, when we're talking about GHG emissions, there are different sources of GHG emissions. We have households, emissions from households, emissions from industries, emissions from transportation, emissions from agriculture. So countries need to put in place measures that will ensure that emissions from those sources are reduced. If not eradicated, they are reduced. Then apart from that, there is also need for government to encourage renewable energy. Yes, the energy action plan, energy transition plan rather, was developed in Nigeria, was adopted in Nigeria. But why asking citizens to go for renewable energy while jettioning the reliance of fossil fuel? Renewable energy needs to be made affordable, not necessarily cheap. So government needs to encourage sustainable investment in renewable energy. And for example, Nigeria has abundance of renewable energy like sunlight. So there is need for government to encourage renewable investment in, sustainable investment in renewable energy by making available favorable markets for investors in renewable energy. They can also reduce bottlenecks in obtaining licensing and permission. And apart from that, government can also fund renewable energy projects by partnering with international organizations like World Bank, African Development Bank, and so on. That is going to ensure that, okay, renewable energy will be more affordable. It might not necessarily be cheap, but it should be affordable. So it should be easier for people to move from fossil fuel to renewable energy sources. The another thing that government also needs to put in place is that the adaptation measures too also need to be, we have to be committed to it. The fact is, we are all witnessing the challenges of climate change. We are witnessing the impact of climate change. And from what the other speakers have said, it doesn't look as if it's going to get better. So government needs to put in place those measures that will make it easier for people to cope more with the challenges and impacts of climate change. Another thing that government also needs to ensure is awareness, consciousness. For me in Nigeria, when you talk about the issue of environment, if people look at it as issues that are luxurious, okay, it's only when you are comfortable that you start talking about climate and issues that relate to environment. But the fact is, we are all victims of impacts of climate change. So there is need for government to create awareness. Go to the roots, go to the remote areas, let people know what we are actually up against, what you're actually facing. It needs to be those kind of awareness should be translated to local languages for people to actually know what you are talking about. Then apart from that, there is need for children to also be inculcated with climate change, with climate consciousness and environmental protection. That will go a long way to assist them in. And also, one thing about NDC is that we look at it as a global kind of target or commitment. But the fact is, NDC is an aggregate of community and sectors efforts across the world. So we can also start from our different, from the comfort of our homes, from our different angles to assist in tackling the impacts of climate change and also assist in reducing global temperature. So for me, government really needs to be committed to whatever to whatever pledges they've made. And they also have to commit funds. It's also very important. There is need for funding, because government that is telling people to jettison fossil fuel sources of energy for renewable energy should also know that there is need for investment in renewable energy. There is need for researches. There is need for technology exchange. Government, for example, in Nigeria, should send people out to other countries to learn from them so that they can bring their technology for the purpose of making renewable energy affordable for people. Then, just like I've said, there is need for policy push. Yes, there is need for policy. Nigeria has adopted its energy transition plan, but up to now, Nigeria is yet to adopt its national action plan on climate. It's going to assist in setting the ball rolling. At least government should not just, it shouldn't be about just dumping your NDCs without making efforts to implement to implement those goals that are set. Then apart from that, I think the climate action tracker is also a way to encourage the achievements of NDCs as they are set by different countries of the world. At least that assists in grading countries or giving them marks as to their efforts in implementing their NDC. Nigeria was rated fair by the tracker based on its slow implementation of its NDCs. So the issue of climate change is here and it affects all of us, and we must all put in place efforts to ensure that we do not face the worst impacts of climate change. I hope, we have only one heart. That's just the bottom line. And one thing about our heart is that we are not just here interacting with the earth, but we are also holding it in trust for the coming generation. How do we make this place better for people that are coming after us? So that is my own little contribution on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello?
Thank you, Professor Akai. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. May I now invite Ms. Jessica to do the summary?
Yes, thank you so much, Lawyer Halimat, for that very in-depth presentation. From your presentation, we were able to understand that the NDC is a climate action plan that outlines the country's commitments and contributions to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing climate change. The NDC helps with emission reduction targets through specific quantifiable targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It helps with adaptation strategies, measures to enhance the country's resilience to climate change impacts, such as strengthening infrastructure, promoting sustainable agriculture, and improving water resource management. And NDC helps with mitigation actions, strategies and actions the country will take to reduce emissions, and financial and technical support. And some countries may request financial and technical assistance to implement their NDCs, particularly for developing nations. Now, as for Nigeria's implementation of its NDCs, we can say that Nigeria, although they are on the right path, they are yet to properly fully commit and implement their stated NDCs. So Nigeria needs to work on their renewable energies. They need to increase the share of renewable energy in its energy mix. They need to work on rural electrification. The country needs to commit to expanding access to electricity in rural areas through upgrade solutions, maybe even solar panels. We also need to look at how Nigeria can encourage sustainable land use and how Nigeria can implement various adaptation measures to address climate impacts on agriculture, water resources, and infrastructure. Nigeria requires climate financing, and it needs financial and technical support for international partners to help implement its NDC effectively, as is common among the nations. Although NDCs are not static, they can be updated and enhanced over time to reflect the country's evolving climate goals and circumstances. Thank you so much for your presentation. It is much appreciated.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Jessica, as well, for the very vivacious and vibrant summary. On the next pointer that we are to discuss is about the carbon decarbonization targets. Do we have our speaker, Ernest Kanakana Mutenda? I don't see you online. So
yes, we don't see him. I have also sent him a message, but I have not received anything. So maybe we will not have him today.
okay. So I open this topic to the floor. If anybody is interested, you may put your interest in the chat box to present, and then we will call you towards the end. And going further, I don't see Dr. Moises as well. Dr.
Yes,
Isa, are you there?
think, I mentioned in the chat, Dr. Moses has mentioned that his wife is not well, and so he won't be able to present.
Okay. And what about Dr. Isa? I don't see her as well. So I will now call upon the next speaker. Yeah, which is Dr. Gokul. And let me take a moment to introduce the topic and Dr. Gokul as well. So the next pointer that we are here to deliberate is about the global effort to net zero. And the emissions have to, the emissions is of course the problem, and it can be approached in a collaborative manner. So countries, businesses, and individuals worldwide are setting ambitious climate targets and implementing sustainable practice to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions. And along with this collective commitment, which are in lines with the Paris Agreement, is focused on limiting global warming and mitigating the adverse effects of climate change while promoting a more suitable and sustainable and resilient future for all. So upon that note, we have here Mr. Gokul D, who is a dedicated professional, and he has a strong commitment to science, technology, and environmental advocacy. So he is into R&D at Carbondum Universal Limited, and he's a rocket engineer and scientist at the renowned ISRO, which is the Indian Space Research Organization. So his contributions extend beyond the field of space exploration, as he is always considered or deeply engaged in the environmental causes. So, so he's a part of Engineers Without Borders, Chennai. And he also holds an advisory position at the Abdul Kalam International Foundation, House of Kalam Rameshwaram. And he also serves as an honorary secretary for LICHE-CRC, and he's a joint secretary for the HEMSI Chennai chapter. And he's also a part of IGEN, and he holds the position of chemical head IEI TVLC. So through his journey, he has been making a huge positive impact and a contribution to the field of science, technology, and environmental sustainability. We welcome you, sir, and we look forward to your inputs. Mr. Gokul?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful
Hello.
session.
Hello, 1 second. Just sorry to interrupt. Spiro, you have a hand up, but we will take question answers and discussion at the end of the or when we finish with the speakers. So thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And sir, as I request every other speaker, please keep your inputs between 10 and 15 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's a wonderful session has been organized by 2030. Definitely, I think the world is already moving towards on the global warming as well as the climatic change. And so the topic I think given to us, I think like the measures for net zero emissions. Definitely, I think globally, I think there are so many. The countries have already set net zero targets and signed to reduce the greenhouse gases emission while constructing building that has to be net zero rated. And they run off from almost like all the renewable, and they don't want to produce any greenhouse gases emission. So the objective by 2030, I think, is very newly constructed building to be the green. And by the end of 2040, 50, this goal expands to cover all the building in line that was made by the Paris Agreement. But what is happening out of all the initiatives we could choose to focus on, this one is the most important. After all, buildings are responsible for approximately half of emission and power consumption. While it is true that many factors contribute to this number, we can chip out a little by little. Example, the World Green Building Council, also a global project working towards the net zero 2050, the entire building industry and achieving net zero targets in all new buildings by 2030. So many countries are involved in project including Green Building Council for the following nations, example like Brazil, Canada, Australia, Colombia, Netherlands, Spain, UAE, South Africa, Hong Kong, including India, Ireland, and all these countries have taken up initiative in bringing up the net zero, especially for bringing up this green building. And over 110 countries have pledged already that they have taken a pledge to reach this net zero emission in the compliances with Paris Agreement. But they are yet to set adequate policies and law to battle climatic change. The Energy and Climatic Change Unit offers a net zero tracker to list countries in the net zero emission race. I think so far only 2 countries. It's very well-known country. I think we all know the carbon negative we always think about is none other than Bhutan, which have achieved a negative carbon dioxide emission status, but still few other countries have made legally binding agreement and proposal or have only discussed actions plans to take. The country with legally binding agreements so far are Sweden, the UK, France, Denmark, New Zealand, and Hungary. I think country with proposed legalization include Canada, South Korea, Spain, Fiji, and other European. So there are many countries within the policy document, including but not limited to, especially US, China, Japan, and Germany. I think what really happening to the entire global world, I think the many countries have initiated the policy level, but the actions are very poor. I think that has to be taken it very fast, because if that is the case, it's not going to be taken up. I think globally, I think it is not only like a developed nation. I think underdeveloped nation also going to suffer on this climatic change. Always we think, I think the local problems can be solved so that we can act as global. That's what always people try to see. If you start talking about making a small step towards in bringing this net zero, definitely I think globally we can achieve that. Country like India, definitely I think it's a growing country. But what is happening really, I think the industrialization is already keep going up, and we cannot able to bring down the carbon emission. And the Prime Minister of the Indian nation has already agreed that by 2070, I think they want to bring the net zero, but it is too a long period. I think it is an immediate action has to be taken care that they can able to bring back the 2070 to at least by 2045, and they can take a precautions actions, because the two important countries which the people's like probably the populations more important countries are like one is in India and another is China. I think maybe if these two countries started acting the global net zero in a very important way, I think definitely I think we can be able to bring it down. So the very important, I think we need to try to have more policy level changes from the government, and this policy level should be as an action plan. It's not only like create a lots of plan and put it in the document, and if it's not coming out, I think definitely I think fail to do that. And that also I think has to be played equally by all the community people. It is not that something like a governance government is initiating some kind of a policy and it's only like limited to government what I should do. So I think the global warming as well as the climatic change, it also like make a complete induces across the world, and every people across the world, million like 700 million people is bound to be there. Earlier, I think we used to see a kind of a cyclone or kind of a famine is something like a 5 years once or 3 years once. I think nowadays, I think every year, I think at least minimum we could be able to see minimum 3 or 4 the climatic disaster is happening up. And this is an example, I think it is already initiated by because of the global warming. And I think the every individual should take up some kind of initiative. It is not that I only like bound when government is insisting a policy or they give some penalty, I will do. I keep working for the climatic change. Not so. If you try to see, I think in India, I think we have a state called Tamil Nadu. And being I am from Tamil Nadu, I think the Tamil Nadu government has taken a separate ministry for environment and climatic change. See, they thought, I think it is not only like a global issue, it is also local issue. Every small climatic change is induces the GDP growth also. Because every time they try to see there is an impact on their disaster management, and they have to spend huge money on recovering the people or recovering the community or recovering the wealth. It becomes like a huge task. And they thought, I think we need to initiate a separate ministry, and that has been evolved by the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, and they're working on it. And they brought already advisory board, and they given an action plan, and they wanted to implement to the each and every houses of the state. So that is what I think a small example. I think I want to just narrate it. I think a small. I think we can always contribute the IGEN. IGEN is playing important role in bringing this net zero. I like example. I think everybody use electricity in their home, but eventually, are we using the electricity in the proper way? Example, I think we switch on the light and we go for like a kind of a restroom or washing room, and we will not switch off it. We'll just come back and we'll continue to do the work. And that also again an impact that a common man who doesn't switch off his light, I think again, I think he is wasting huge amount of energy, and that relates continuously like a production of energy is not that wasting 700 liters of water. Again, he has to induce some coal production. So every unit of individual is playing important role. So like that, I think small initiatives taken by an individual, I think we can able to contribute to the global change, and that only I think we can able to bring down the net zero. It's not government is talking about in a various agreement like Paris event or something like upcoming the COP committee, and many where they try to talk. I think when an initiative is not taken by the every common person, I think that cannot be achieved also. And sufferers is everybody. It's not only government. So small examples like how we could able to save the energy. Why we have to unwantedly waste the every part of our energy for unutilized way. Are we required the planned way of utilizing energy? Are we required a planned way of developing a green building concept? Or can we implement a renewable source of energy, which is highly required? And can we avoid this coal productions of energy? Because that has to be think about by every individual, and we need to enforce it. And we can always ask the government also to plan for every 3 months, 6 months, 1 year an agenda, and they can try to see how far they can able to implement their actions. Otherwise, we will be keep talking, we will be making an advocacy, and it all will be in the paper. And definitely, once we see our next generation, they are going to become a huge sufferer. Because right now we at least see every 3 months or 6 months once some kind of a climatic change. A day is going to come that every day or every couple of days a climatic change will induce it, and this is going to give a very big impact. And that is very a pathetic situation that we are going to give it to the next generation. It's becoming again a question mark. So definitely it is not only like making a government to initiate. It is a local a common person to initiate, and they need to think about how we could able to be a part of in bringing this net zero. The only country I said, the Bhutan, I think definitely we have to give an applause to Bhutan, because they almost have 70% of the reserve forest to be protected. And they said that I think we are like a lesser than the GDP of a small city in India, but we want to make our own country a much more richer, and we want to be an example for the complete world that we are a carbon negative. Why not? We cannot adopt in every small community or small cities or small village or a small a state of entire world, and make Bhutan as an example, so that at least we can create some 100 Bhutans in the world. Then I think that becomes a important decision for every the advocacy people of developed nation to adopt, and they can also bring it down the net zero. So I just take my conclusion. I think the always I think we talk about more about a global warming or climatic change in the developed nation way. I think this has to be bring it down the local way, and every
Gokul sir, you're muted.
able to create a definitely if 700 million people in the complete the global population has thought about creating a change on this climatic change, definitely the net zero can be brought it down at least the target of 2030. Nevertheless, I think by 2040 at least we can achieve that. And we have only one earth. I think we doesn't have much more planet to explore and make ourselves to go and make live in other planet like Mars or Jupiter or Venus. So we have a beautiful earth. It is always like given by the Almighty that it's a green and clean earth, and it is our everybody's duty that we have to protect our earth, and we also has to give to the next generation, because it's like a loan we have taken by our previous generated our grandfathers or father, and now it is our duty that how we could able to make a country or earth as a very in the net zero of the global warming as well as net zero of the carbon, and that will impact the next generation also to be protected. However, we see the technology growth, the adaptations of the various sectors momentum, but still we need to see the net zero should be implemented in a very the faster rate, and that has to be brought back by our own mother earth to be very green and clean, so that we can make that ensure that we can always live very peaceful, and the much more money we spent on the climatic changes, all the things can be avoided, and we can able to create a Bhutan as an example where the carbon negative can be brought inside. So with that, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gokul. It was crisp, informative, and definitely, if a small country like Bhutan can do it, everybody else can definitely achieve with efforts. I now invite Dr. Ishrat Matsana to moderate Dr. Gokul's inputs.
Yeah, thank you, Sandhya ji. Thank you, Gokulji, for the wonderful expression thoughts about how we can achieve net zero. As you have said, like net zero, it's not just about the government policies, but the individual has to be involved in it. Each and every individual. Net zero, when we want it to happen at a larger scale, it has to be at the individual level with the small actions, as you mentioned, like switching off the light, or as we do, as most of us are right now working with laptops. If we are not working also, we keep our laptops open. Even that contributes. So every action of ours is the one which will help us to give a greener planet to our next generation. As you said, like we have taken this greener planet as a loan from our ancestors, our previous generation, to provide it to the new generation. We have to work fast. That is the government policies, the check over net zero, how it is being executed in industries also has to be checked at 3 months, 6 months, and yearly, as you mentioned in your talk. If all this is implemented, then achieving net zero is not far off. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful expression of thoughts regarding net zero achievement. Thank you. Over to you, Sandhya ji.
Thank you, Dr. Ishrat. Our pointer number 4, which is decarbonization, right? Decarbonization targets. Our chosen speaker was unable to be here due to some unavoidable reason. So our team member, Dr. Ishrat Misana, has kindly consented to present her inputs on this topic. She's a science teacher by profession with enormous amounts of experience, and she's been part of IGEN, working with the younger generation or the student community in bringing about the change that we all wish to see. We welcome you, Dr. Ishrat, and request you to present on the right decarbonization targets to give a small input. So these are essential. These targets are essential in the fight against climate change, and they involve specific science-based goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in line with the Paris Agreement's objective. So what is the right target, or what does that right mean? Again, when we consider the latest climate science, and we have an ambitious target to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, and if possibly, ideally aim to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this guiding target, or which we see everywhere around the globe, and the government policies and corporate strategies and the individual actions, which will help in achieving this sustainable low carbon future. So over to you, Dr. Ishrat.
Thank you, Sandhya ji. As given an opportunity, I would like to present the roadmap of India's 2030 decarbonization targets. So when we talk about this decarbonization target, there are highly ambitious goals that have been announced at COP26. That is to have 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity and meeting 50% of energy requirements from renewables by 2030, which are achievable. But at the same time, it's very challenging because it's not about the low-cost pathway for meeting growing energy demand, but serving the socio-economic imperatives of these developing countries. Because developed countries and underdeveloped countries, we need to have this establishment of these renewable energies. The pace of installation of renewables has been very high in these recent years, but the large share of this variable renewable energy needs greater flexibility and resilience in the grid management. Because when we are talking about renewable energy, okay, it's all about distribution, creation of large-scale storage, which would be essential for providing this resilience and also for fully utilizing the huge increase in solar power generation. Fortunately, solar power with storage has become cheaper than electricity from the new thermal power plants. Coming to the achieving the India's 2030 targets. So we have the first one is increase the share of decentralization kilowatt range solar power by introducing feed-in traffic. That is, we should have a reduced distribution company, that is DISCOM cost, provide better quality power in villages and increase the farmers' incomes. So it's not about just providing the power in the urban areas, but at the same time, we want to have a decentralization capacity addition in the rural India through private investment. So this feed-in traffic has to be well above the price bids that have received for the large solar projects, because small installations will also have greater risk. So this has to be balanced, well balanced. The next is about increased momentum of wind power growth. So for this one, we should have incentives, repowering of old wind projects at high resource sites, commence offshore wind power development. For this one, we need to reintroduce banking. The banking makes it worthwhile for industrial consumers to set up capacity wind farms. So establishing the wind farms needs the investment. So it's not just about the industry, but the banking sector should also be a part of it. The next was the introduce time of use traffics. That is, distribution companies to undertake separate peaking power procurement. They have to choose to all the consumers, starting with commercial, industrial consumers, to buy carbon-free electricity. So it is important that each and every one should have incentives to flattening demand of the curve. Next is about undertake detailed system studies and planning on continuing basics to appropriately access power system, security and stability with high share of variable renewable energy in the great generation mix. Then implement storage projects. That is, we need to have pumped storage plants, prepare detailed project reports of feasible sites in order to prioritize and include in infrastructure pipeline. We should have solar thermal with storage. Invite traffic bids for development of projects at identified sites with land, provide solar radiation data, create a competitive industry structure as in solar power development. Then we should also have battery energy storage system and also hydrogen energy storage technologies. Above all, India is targeting to become Atmanirbhar, becoming a global competitive renewable energy manufacturing hub. So we need to scale up the domestic production to large volumes to devise benefit of economics of scale, expand production-linked incentives schemes, use government procurement for renewable energy manufacturing in India, achieve energy security. Achieving energy security is the one which will make us Atmanirbhar. So this is something like we have in 2015 COP21, we had an electric power capacity target of 40% installed capacity from non-fossil based energy sources by 2030. As economic-wide emissions intensify target from 30 to 35% below 2005 levels by 2030, and a carbon sink expansion target of creating an additional carbon sink. These are the decisions, India's commitment that was taken. But in 2021, in COP26, we have said like we'll reduce the carbon intensity of economy by less than 45%. India will take its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. India will meet 50% of its energy from renewable energy by 2030. And it will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now onwards till 2030. But as Gokul sir has already mentioned, By the year 2070, India will achieve the target of net zero, which is very far off, but with every individual's effort, we can make it happen earlier. To summarize, the key achievements of India 2030 targets were, firstly, renewable energy expansion has been taking place primarily through large grid projects. This unlocking of potential of decentralized renewable energy generation needs focus and appropriate policies. Secondly, bidding for utility scale wind and solar power projects would need to be scaled up substantially. In addition, offshore wind power development should be initiated. Thirdly, solar and wind power generation is variable, intermittent, and depends upon weather condition. The integration of solar and wind requires an adequate amount of flexibility in power system. And this is much feasible also. Even for the households, we can have an integrated solar and wind power, because this is one of the student project which was executed recently by us, wherein we have used the vertical axis wind turbine along with the solar panel, which can meet the requirements of an household. Fourthly, India should initiate storage projects using mature technologies for pumped storage plants, concentrated thermal plants, and the batteries. So India should try to be a cost-effective and competitive manufacturing hub of renewable energy. These are the targets that are there to achieve the COP26. So this is how we can have the policies defined and we can achieve the net zero targets. Thank you all for your patience hearing. Over to you, Sandhya ji.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishrat. Nobody can ever say that it was spontaneous or a last-minute presentation. It was so crisp, so well delivered, with all so simple and yet effective, with so much of statistics. And definitely, as you said, with all the efforts, it's only the little drops that make an ocean. Let us all try to bring that 2070 to as earlier as possible. So in the meanwhile, our for the other 2 pointers, due to some unavoidable reasons, our speakers are not able to be here. So I open your inputs of the topics to the floor. If anybody is interested to present, kindly contact us through the chat box. Otherwise, you can also contribute anything in related to net zero. You can give your inputs here. So the floor is open for further contributions on the topic, the road to net zero.
Sandhya Shri.
Yes.
Robert Stern wants to speak on point 6, which is invest in carbon markets or greenwashing.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
You can invite him. And I think let him speak first. And if some of the points are not covered with carbon trading, I can do that later. But please invite him first. Thank you.
Yes. Welcome, Dr. Robert Stern. May I request you to quickly introduce yourself and talk about investing in carbon markets. In the meanwhile, let me give a quick input on before you begin to speak. So investing in carbon markets involves purchasing carbon credits or offsets to compensate for one's own greenhouse gas emissions. So these markets create financial incentives for emission reduction and support climate mitigation projects. So by participating in such carbon markets, individuals, companies, and governments can offset their emissions and contribute to a more sustainable, low carbon future. So thank you so much, Dr. Robert Stern, to coming forward to speak. May I request you to quickly introduce yourself and begin, and give your inputs in about 10 minutes time, like I've said to all speakers. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I hope I can be a bit quicker than that. First of all, thank you for the promotion. I'm not a doctor at all, but I appreciate the elevation. I may be unusual in this context in that I'm from a journalistic rather than an academic background, hence no doctor. But what I have done is I spent kind of 35 years covering power dynamics as a journalist, working for network news, like for ABC News in Tokyo, and then CNBC Asia, and there was a Shanghai bureau chief, and then CNN Beijing bureau producer in the late 90s. And then I made documentaries, a lot of them about Europe for Japan. So I've got quite a global perspective. And in the way the documentary filmmakers do, I see the big picture and the small picture and kind of how they connect. So that's really where I'm coming from, a very pragmatic and practical point of view. And I get, the sense that most of the people in the GSFN network and probably on this call take a more academic approach, which is, of course, really important because we need to base policy on evidence. But we also, what we've learned from the past 50 years is that evidence isn't enough. And we've known for 50 years the reality of climate change, and we've had the technology to address it for 50 years. So what's the problem? Right? The problem is humans and power dynamics and the way politics works, which is more my area of experience and maybe expertise. So where the issue of evidence and politics interact, where hard fact and squidgy, inadequate human beings, as evolved primate, interact, that's really where see-through news, which was started about 3 years ago, and see-through carbon, its recent offshoot, focus, because that's where you got to kind of get things done. And Renuka has been very supportive both of see-through news and now of see-through carbon as well. So see-through carbon is our effort to really come up with a very pragmatic, practical solution to this greenwash problem. Because I think this whole issue of where evident science and politics clash can be summarized in the word greenwash, right? So you make it look like you're following the science, but you're not really, you're just following the money. Let's put it bluntly. This is the problem. Politics, governments are captured by money, big oil has a lot of money. This is what's causing all the friction and preventing us. That's what's standing between us and carbon drawdown. So specifically, I mean, we started off at See-Through News, we started off just looking at how to make the inactive active. And the goal was very simple, just to measurably reduce carbon. And of course, that can be measured in, gigatons of CO2 equivalent. But what rapidly became apparent is even that's a problem. When we say measurably reducing carbon, first of all, you've got to measure it accurately. And we are not being well served by that. At the moment, there are dozens and dozens of international standards, all of which claim to either measure or price or assess or somehow account for carbon. And we're talking about the same thing. It's just physics, right? It's a volume, a mass of CO2 that is transferred from the ground into the sky through combustion. But this leaving it to market economics has resulted in this incredibly chaotic system. A system that can value, there are 70 different standards out there. One of them can value the same unit, a ton of CO2 equivalent, at $137 in Uruguay, I think it is. And the same volume in Ukraine is $1.07. It's crazy, right? It's mad. So the reason why, and this is why we set up See-Through Carbon, because what we observed is all these carbon auditing standards, what they have four things in common. Some of them have all four, but all of them have one of them in common. They're what we call ICOP, ICOP. I, inaccurate. They're just not measuring everything, especially scope 3, and they're using nonsense offsets to reduce the number. It's got nothing to do with the actual carbon footprint, it's just inaccurate. Secondly, they're costly, C. Now, this is really important when 70% of all global emissions come from SMEs who can't afford to pay for a standard. So if your standard is something that you have to pay for, that immediately rules out 70% of the potential people who need it. So, but it's obviously why they do it, that because the other two things, the O is they're opaque. Most of these standards are funded by venture capital, and because they're charging for it, their IP, they protect it, so they have to make it opaque. So we can't actually see what's in the black box that's calculating these numbers. And finally, they're proprietary, but it's all part of the same problem. Basically, they're charging. The moment you charge to use your standard, it's inherently corruptible. That's what it seemed to us. So along with Renuka and a few other people, including some world experts and not just carbon accounting, but other fields, we set up See-Through Carbon. Now, See-Through Carbon is the opposite of ICOP, ICOP. It's AFOT. So the I is inaccurate, while the A is accurate, right? We're counting everything. We're counting all your scope 3. We're not counting any nonsense fantasy offsets. So the number, as far as current technology allows, will be your actual carbon footprint. Secondly, it's F, free. It's free to use. So that means it's instantly accessible to everyone, including those 70% of emissions produced by SMEs who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford these expensive carbon standards. It's open source. RO is not opaque, it's O for open source. So as soon as something better comes along, we can incorporate it. And if someone sees a problem in our methodology, you can comment on it. And if the trustees, like Renuka, agree, we adopt it. It makes it more dynamic, and we can always be up to date and provide the best responses. And finally, the T is transparent. So it's the opposite of proprietary. So we let everyone know, everyone check our workings. So that's why we've set up See-Through Carbon. And it's kind of unique because although there are dozens and hundreds of different competing standards and offsetting schemes and this and that, one thing they all have in common is they have bank accounts. And as a journalist, I know what's the first thing you do? You follow the money. If there's no money to follow, there's nothing to follow. You just got to listen to the message rather than the messenger. And the tagline of See-Through Carbon is, if you can't buy integrity, why should you be able to sell it? And this is really a challenge to all this greenwashing, in which a lot of governments are complicit. And we want to put it out there in order to challenge them.
Mr. Lukman, can I request you to mute yourself? Mr. Lukman, please mute yourself.
So yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
I think that's less than my 10
please.
minutes, but if anyone wants to ask any questions, of course, I'm more than happy to hear from such an expert and eminent audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Robert. Sorry again, but still, I thought what I gifted you, I won't take back. So Dr. Robert's turn. It was great listening to you from a journalist's point of view. You've basically been into the field and made your analysis. May I now request Dr. Renuka Thakur to give her inputs, if any, on the same pointer.
Thank you, Sandhya Shri. Before that, I will welcome Isabel's comments, because she wrote something on chat about greenwashing, and we would like to welcome her first to tell about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Renuka. So we have a new law in the European Union which is supposed to stop the greenwashing. If I'm not mistaken, it starts by next year, and it will be very costly for companies if they claim things like climate neutral products because they are offsetting their carbon emissions, but it's not really climate neutral. So it's really there to, and it's I think a really good example of how we can be more strict about this matter, and also make it costly for companies if they claim to be environmental friendly and doing something about climate action, if they don't really do in general. And I think we can learn around the world from each other. And maybe this is also an example someone can take to COP28 if you are there, and say, hey, isn't it something what we can also use for other countries? Like there's an example which is just coming into place. I had one question I had for Robert Stern, which was about what do you think about all the law enforcements, or actually young people suing governments, oil companies in more and more countries around the world. I feel it's a very good action for oil and gas to stop them, to make them pay for the damages for ecocide. What do you think about it? And another one is, do we need a global court, a human rights court, which is also including ecocide, which could be much more effective to stop those oil and gas companies?
Sure. Would you like me to respond to that now, Renuka, or do you want to speak first?
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think regarding lawsuits, yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting. I mean, basically, we're in such an emergency, we've got to try everything at once. So I welcome all these things. And of course, the great thing about the law is it requires specificity. And once it's established, you get case law. So it applies to everything. So I think it's really great what they're doing in these lawsuits, but it takes time. This is the problem. And of course, although the law is meant to be this objective, neutral thing, again, as a maybe cynical journalist, you can tell that people don't always follow the law, right? And it can take a long time for truth to out and to redress injustices. I think doing it through, so the kind of human rights approach is great, and I'd welcome it. And there are very interesting things going on in Ecuador and Venezuela. And if you listen to this podcast called Drilled, which I highly recommend, by Amy Westervelt, who's a fantastic investigative journalist who's been researching this and doing really great reporting on it for years. She's fantastic on covering all the latest developments in that. So there's one kind of human rights attitude, but actually I think, or approach, I support that, but just as effective and maybe more effective is the more kind of stakeholder approach, where there are these litigant groups who buy shares in companies, actually turn up to the shareholders' meetings and start making really awkward points and pointing out the risk of greenwashing to investor value, for the long-term value of the company. Now, this is about money, right? People care about money a lot more than they do about carbon. So I think this is a far more practical, short-term approach, and we've got to try. I mean, again, we'll try everything, but I think that one's more interesting because it could have more immediate, measurable results. And on your second point about the Human Rights Court, well, yes, it would be great. But, this is why I favor these very pragmatic, immediate, money-based solutions, because they'll probably reduce more carbon more measurably quicker. And I'm just very pragmatic about that.
Thank you. No, I'm just speaking now. There is a bit of, some technical problem in our Zoom meeting, and someone is not allowing to go away or enter. So that's what I was trying to solve. But anyway, we are here. Let me just answer one question because someone is asking me. Right, so I'm here. Sorry about this. Yeah, so what I think now, we are talking about carbon trading, carbon washing, greenwashing, and so on. And first of all, let me just start with carbon calculation and why they are so important, and why we also want some sort of carbon trading, but not in the way it has been discussed or we need to rethink what we mean by carbon trading, and why carbon trading can help us to achieve net zero, uh, and also about greenwashing, or all about what is involved in carbon reporting and all those things. I think we need to again revisit those terminologies as well as the procedures behind it and the thinking behind it, which would help us to have just transition in this carbon world. First of all, carbon calculations, they are about the carbon emissions involved right from the start of the product or raw materials where they are sourced and until it is disposed, or whether it is taken back as a resource for another manufacturing or other product or services. So it is about all circularity, trying to make our economy circular, and that was the intention, to understand the carbon emissions in the whole process of our products and services, and how the way we live and so on. So initially we started with material things like products only, then it went about we also thought about energy used in our services, and so the services were add on, and now we have also expanded our um, you know this thinking in a expanded in our thinking in a way that we have accepted that any carbon or any other activity is so economic activity or whatever we are doing is sourced by ecological capital, and therefore we now also have biodiversity, and within that we have biodiversity is like trees and our ecosystem and so on. And so each and every thing in the world on our earth has now some sort of carbon identity and carbon measurement. Carbon, they are now all unit of carbon. So that is we must be thinking. Now carbon trading was introduced to balance our carbon emissions in a way that whoever is emitting a lot of carbon should actually decrease emitting carbon, but while they are doing that, to help them to motivate to become a carbon neutral, we thought that some sort of offsetting might be useful. But that offsetting should be was mainly into renewable energy and forest. Until now it is like that, but there was also need to put a strong regulations, how we validate, how we you know uh, go about it. So what should be the policy at national level, what should be the benchmarking of this and so on. So there are plenty of procedures involved in how we trade carbon. uh, and we have seen, and then reporting was the one of the element was reporting, and people took advantage of reporting their carbon journey or carbon procedures, and they made plenty of uh, showcases in those reportings showing that they were decreasing carbon uh, 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 decreasing carbon, but it wasn't in a right way, or no one, there was no accreditation to those things, and therefore it was called carbon washing. For example, the fossil fuel companies saying that we are helping the industry to diminish the carbon by introducing some investment into renewable energy. Of course, that was nice, but there were plenty of uh, game playing, as Robert says, and power, uh, uh, which were fall. And there were recently also, there are many studies showing that wherever the carbon credits were allotted, people saw that no development or no biodiversity, or the claims were wrong. And so now people do not trust carbon trading. Many countries have actually, from the report I read from UNDP, 80% of countries are saying that they are in the favor of carbon trading, and they want to develop some regulations and so on. And that's where the ESG has come into play, that while we are doing these carbon emissions, like lowering down the carbon emissions, we should be doing it in a just way. And so the governance and social elements have grown up, has been debated and have enhanced our understanding that how we should go about carbon reduction. And so ESG has come in play, and it is an instrument, and people are developing taxonomy around it. And there is a huge investment coming forward for ESG. However, just now ESG forms only 2% of the total our economy. And so it is a very, very slow development. It is very even difficult development because of the complexity of different countries at different stages, and also about different understanding. Um, then there also comes, who should people, where people should especially because let me go back, sorry. The carbon trading, when we talk about carbon emissions, we know that high level no, very large organizations have very high carbon emissions, and they are nearly 80%. But however, we have these 90% of their uh, suppliers are SMEs, and that is the scope 3 of that large organizations. So large organizations cannot reduce their carbon emissions until they get control of the scope 3, which are the largest part of these are SMEs. And therefore there is a need to educate and make SMEs also carbon neutral, or we can say that literate, in a way that they reduce their carbon emissions. And so we need to have a clean supply chain. And that is where I think focusing on SMEs, educating them, measuring them, their carbon emissions, and reducing it would play a big role. Now, coming back to that carbon offsetting, like when we wanted to offset, we have always focused on forest and renewable energy. But we need to change our mindset, that how we can reduce our carbon emissions at our place, where it is the source of emission, at the source of emission. And it should be within our own vigilance. Maybe we should be vigilant about what is going on where we are offsetting. So if we have the same what we are doing on the other side of the world, without the knowledge what's going on there, if you increase your nature based solutions in your own place, then that would have more impact rather than carbon offsetting to another place. So carbon trading, if we take it as an our own organizational policy, then it might work. So reducing carbon emissions and also offsetting within ourselves by creating some social capital, environmental capital, and so on, that would make a real sense. And that is where I will stop. I know what Isabel mentioned, and my thinking is that greenwashing will be within ourselves. green reduction also should be within ourselves, and green carbon trading also should be within ourselves, and that is where we want to go. So thank you very much. Hello, Sandhya Shri, can you not unmute yourself? Sorry.
Yeah, now I can. I got a request from you. Now I can.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Some funny
So,
today. Sorry about this. There
yes,
is a hand raised by Isabel, and so if I will welcome her to speak, and then you can carry on. Sorry about it.
no, not a problem at all. So, yeah, once Isabel is done, Mr. Spiro has also raised his hand. After both of their interactions, I will take over. Yeah, Ms. Isabel, kindly unmute and interact. I guess all of the participants are unable to unmute. Dr. Renuka, you have to unmute them personally.
Thank you, it worked. Yes, now I was able to unmute. Thanks a lot for the opportunity and also for the great insights today, Dr. Renuka. I got a question for you. How do you see, for example, the development of artificial intelligence, things like Bitcoin, which are using a lot of energy? And we currently in this world, what I see, like capital investors invest mainly in artificial intelligence, in crypto, in technology, and they don't look too much for sustainability. What I'm really fearing, because, for example, Bitcoin has the footprint of Portugal. So of a complete country, is 200,000 times a Visa, so credit card transactions. And what like the ESG standards, I feel, are not really taking off here. Like there's still so much of investment and also in artificial intelligence. And I'm asking myself a bit like, how can we make sure that capital investors, especially also from the US, are not going forward to develop such solutions, which are even more harming?
Thank you very much. That is very, very interesting question. And that would be, I think, the very hot topic in coming COP. So especially with AI, I completely agree that the AI has solutions because they are databases, data analysis about plenty of things, and we can bring those complex data to actually we can exploit those data for informational decision making, informed decision making. However, you are very correct that these data, we will need a huge data centers to store them, and they are very energy intensive. Bitcoin is just a part of it, so I won't go on with Bitcoin. It's only a tiny part of it. But there are plenty of other things like, I have a report also on AI and climate research just very recently published. And you will see that, GIS and many other tools are being used to collect data around the world every minute, every second of the all our activities, and they give out real-time analysis as well. So of course there is a huge use of energy in that. In that case, our energy innovations have come to our rescue. We are able to generate energy from renewable sources, and that is our great achievement and innovation that is going to help us to keep our data centers going. So wherever we are doing these data centers, two things are to be taken into account. One, the energy generation for the data centers should be from renewable energy, as well as the energy generated from the data center, because data centers are very hot and other things they also generate energy, and that energy should be transformed into some sort of another energy that is useful to humankind activities. So, and that those innovations are happening, and as they accumulate, they would result into better use of data centers. And that problem of energy use for AI will be lessening soon in the future. Here in this case, if you read the case of Saudi Arabia, they are taking the lead, so have a look at it. But at the same time, AI is going to have plenty of other problems, such as, personal data, security of data, and also misexplanation of the data, like misinformed. We are not so much experienced yet, or we are still learning how to interpret the data. And so misinterpretation is going to be a huge problem, and also misuse of that. Like, it should be interpreted by an expert, but if we start interpreting, if we are not expert, then it will be a big problem, because the data will be available to expert as well as to the common person. And if these things, like we have been struggling with misinformation in the COVID time, and like that we will be having plenty of misinformation as well, and that is very scary in the world. So responsible AI is very important here. We are also working on plenty of those rules and regulations, as well as the procedures, that how we should keep responsible AI in play, like what should we do and how we can say that it is a responsible AI. Now generative AI is also on play. We are very baby in that, and I cannot predict much future. Of course there is a lot of future, as people say. I don't know, I'm not an expert in that, but what I understand, that it will be a place of very interesting time, but we all have to be responsible. That is one main thing we have to remember, that responsible of how we co-create our future is with us, and this all debate will help us to shape that. Okay, what was your second question? Sorry, I forgot. Or have I answered all?
Ms. Isabel? Ms. Isabel, are you there?
She is there, but it's okay, I think.
Yes, again, I guess none of us are able to unmute, probably. She has replied saying, yeah, all answered.
All right, so that's it. Thank you very much.
Yes, may I now request Mr. Spiro
Yes.
to
Okay, let
respond?
me just see.
Yeah, can you
Spiro.
please help him unmute, Dr.
Yes,
Renuka?
yes. Spiro is unmuted already.
Okay.
Thank you, Spiro.
Yes. Thank you. It was a long discussion, very good discussion, and very important too. I believe that we have a solution how to fundamentally improve climate change and the life of humanity. The problem is that, as Robert and so many others mentioned here, is that the root cause of climate change is a wrong governing philosophy, wrong governing law, which governs us as society. Growing profit and GDP is a root cause of all problems that you have. And we must change from growing profit GDP to promoting quality and the general welfare of life. So we have to change the system, basically, that is governing the humanity. Actually, what I believe the capitalist system, which is the best so far, it has to change. From a capitalist system, we need a humanist system, which is based in how we human govern ourselves in life. We want, as a human being, are leading by the quality of life and by health, not by wealth. So recently, I published the last book, which I called Governing System, Change Governing System, which explains completely a new system, how we can govern better the humanity and how we can improve life of humanity and save the nature. That's where we have to start, I believe. And that's where we have to work together to spread the voice of the truth and to implement, promote general welfare law in governing all over the world. With this system, socialist, capitalist, communist, and whatever we call those, we can't solve our big problems that we have as a humanity and the nature. We can survive. That's where I urge all of you to work together, to start from the United Nations, to build a new system of governing to save, to improve the life of humanity and save the life of humanity and save the nature, Mother Nature. That's what I have to say shortly. Thank you. And as I said, let's work together to improve life and save humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Spiro. Of course, this is interesting and you have been talking about it. I would like to also just add to everyone that Spiro has recently won Vision Leader Award. And so very big congratulations to him. We have been advocating this idea since in GSFN, but we want to also think a way of how we can move this forward, have some practical, we are at a stage where we can go for a pilot, and we are looking for some, few interesting companies who would like to work with us and see how we can make this more robust and digestible to the companies. Sandhya Shri, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Renuka. Again, I was getting a couple of calls, so I had to mute myself. Yeah. So as we move forward, it is now time to discuss our planner, what we've been doing all this week, and what will we be doing in the next couple of weeks. Let me try to share my screen. Otherwise, I would require Dr. Renuka's help. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible, but someone has. Oh, okay. It is your hand, so I will just lower your hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just see, check. I thought someone has raised their hand, so let me just check. And no, that's fine. Please carry on.
Okay, to all our listeners and viewers online, we had begun this program on the 1st of October with a bombastic launch over the Zoom. And on the first week, on 8th October, we had deliberated on climate adaptation. And the week further, on 15th October, we spoke on the finance and climate action. So how faster can we reach and the different modes. And on 22nd of October, we spoke about renewable energy and how it can power a safer future. So today we have deliberated the road to net zero. And the next week, we will be talking about the loss and damage caused by severe climate changes or climatic events, and what kind of a moral imperative or impact does that have, and how vulnerable nations and individuals have been affected. So, what is the way forward in this direction? On the 12th of November, we will deliberate on the changes in biodiversity and how we can go ahead and embrace this change and make it a viable and sustainable future for all of us. And on 19th November, we will call it a grand finale to deliberate on the pointers that has been discussed and how we will go about presenting it further in the future in COP. So that's it from my end. I now call upon Dr. Ishrat and Ms. Jessica, one after another, to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sandhya Shiji. Like it was a great evening because we could have here, though there were speakers not available, but we could hear Renuka ma'am and also the speakers who have joined. They were not just speakers, but they have given pointers of discussion and how we can achieve net zero. So I thank all the speakers and all the participants who have joined us for today on behalf of IGEN and also GSFN. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Jessica, would you like to say anything? Okay, I guess she would also have problems in unmuting herself, maybe.
Let me just check. I saw her coming in, but
Yeah, she has also messaged saying I can't unmute.
Okay. Yeah.
She's still unable to unmute, is what she says in the chat.
I'm asking her to. So what has happened, in this one? Like whoever I made co-host and other, I don't know why it is not allowing me to do anything. Very strange. I'm trying to ask her. Here now she
Probably
is
try
able to.
once again.
I think she is able to do now.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, she's unmuted now. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Let me see if I can unmute Sridevi also. Let me have a look. But you continue, please, Jessica.
Yeah. Jessica is muted again.
Oh, no.
Okay. Thank you again. I want to thank all the speakers for taking time out of their day to present such insightful talks. I want to thank you for letting us know the severity of the need for new strategies when it comes to plans on how we can implement adaptation and mitigation. I want to thank you all for making it known that climate change is a severity that is happening now and that cannot just be put in the back burner. So thank you to fellow organizers. Thank you to Ms. Sandhya Sri for your amazing coordination. Thank you to Dr. Renuka, Dr. Srividhya for your amazing vision for this conference. And I hope that everyone else has a lovely rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much once again, one and all. Dr. Renuka, would you like to say something? And then we can close the session.
Thank you very much, all the speakers and all the commentators and, organizers. You have been a very good team coordinating between you and helping me out. I am the least worker here, I think, the least one who has worked. So I must credit all the whatever we are doing today here to Dr. Srividhya and Sandhya Shri and Jessica. They are the main three players here, and I'm so thankful to them. I'm just trying again to unmute Sandhya Shri, Srividhya, if I can. I'm trying several times, but I can't. It is just an unfortunate time today that we can't have her. Probably next time, I
Yes,
think
very
it
much.
will be better. And thank you very much for this, very constructive debate today, and everyone participated here. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so before we all could bid goodbye today, so always zero was never considered too good on an exam paper or in a life. But now we all know that, looking at a net zero, how important zero could be in our life, and not just for us, but also all the future generations. So let us work on getting to the net zero as fast as possible. So until next Sunday, wishing you all the best part of the day ahead. Thank you.